inflation mean to you? When I ask you what is inflation, what comes to mind?
Price increase.
Price increase? Yes, very good. Who said that? Okay, Nate, very good. What else? Basically is the, yes, the price.
Lower purchasing power.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Very good. I like that. You feel poor, right? You feel like you got cheated when you go to McDonald's because the Big Mac is so thin. As compared to before, you have to open your mouth so big to eat. In the 80s, when I first was exposed to Big Mac, I remember I had Big Mac every weekend, a milkshake. You know, back then the milkshake you could just do like that, it wouldn't fall. And the Big Mac, you have to open out your mouth so big. But not anymore. Now you could just do it like what? How many bites? About 4? 3? Did I hear 3? Okay, we'll take 3. Some people could do it in 3. And that's inflation, yes. They say, oh, it's the same price. But hey, look at it. It's a lot thinner. Oh, look at how thin that hamburger's meat is. Okay, so this is what we use to measure inflation. It's called CPI. It stands for Consumer Price Index. Now, if you read the newspaper and the news, you might have heard about another expression, another term called Producer Price Index. But in this class, we're just going to concentrate on Consumer Price Index. What is it? For any period, measures the cost in that period of a standard basket of goods. We'll define that coming up. And services, relative to the cost of the same basket of goods and services, again, in the fixed year, known as the base year. So does anybody remember what the definition for base year was from previous class? Anybody?
Like a year when there was no economic disasters going on.
No bad economic thing going on. Yeah, no what we call economic disturbances, such as very high inflation rate, like during the first and second oil shock. I don't know if you heard about it. I think this is a macro class, so you never heard about this story then. This is all in the early 70s. There's another shock in the late 70s. I'm not going to tell the stories today because they're not yet big yet, but I will at some point. And this were the years that, inflation was very high, so you definitely do not want to take those years. The Great Recession, which started around 2007, some of you still remember, and we had some mortgage subprime mortgage problem, so that was not a good year to use as a basis. Okay, so here's the equation you use. Okay, according to this equation, I'm missing something. Okay, so it appears right here at the bottom. So basically, I know it looks kind of long, but basically it's the same thing like what you saw before, To calculate the CPI, all you have to do is take the summations of PI, QI, summation of PI, QI, which is actually the cost. But this would be the base year. And this would be the current year. And that's it. The current year and the base year. So how do you construct this so-called consumer price index? So the government will have an agency that collect this kind of data. They send out people and they pay them, and they conduct something known as consumer expenditure survey. It's like census, they go from house to house, collect this kind of information about how many kids you have, how many of you have income, and what's the income range, what's your demographics, gender, sex, income levels, and things like that. Thank you. So what they do is every year they collect the same data, okay? And you know that for certain years, some certain prices of certain goods will be higher. For example, if you look at if today I were to ask, like, how many of you does not have a cell phone, raise your hand? I don't see anybody. But 20 years ago when I asked that question, I say, what? Huh? I have to ask how many of you have cell phones, and then still I may have one or two. Now, you remember back in the, was it 70s? I don't know when it came about, but in the long time ago, like, I think 70 might be a good guess, yeah, because sometime they have this car phone in the car. So, I think in the 70s or even 60s, you have this so-called cell phone that looks like a brick. You know, you saw military people use it. It's like walkie-talkie. This are like killer. They could kill someone with that heavy thing, you know. Today, it's not like that. Your cell phone, you could hide it, you know, nobody could see it, and nobody even know you owned one because it's so slim and all that. So technology has come a long way. So what we do is, again, you know, that equation tells everything. So now the question would be, what goes into that basket? So when you say standard basket of goods and services, what are you gonna collect? Are you gonna collect, well, usually, typically, they collect things that consumers use normally. What do you think would be a good one? What do we do every day?
Shower. Oh, well, maybe.
Shower, yeah, shower is free. Something that has a price tag on it, product and services.
Eat.
Yeah, eat is a good one, so hamburgers, that probably will go in. What else, like if you, where do you stay?
Drive.
Okay, drive, maybe gas prices. Okay, that's one hot topic, we can talk about it later. Most of you stay in apartment, correct? Okay, do you pay rent or is that for free? I think you do pay rent, okay, that's probably one of the items should be included. And over the years, you know, like I say, the cell phone service before, they didn't have it. So, but today it's so popular that we say it should be included, because if you ask anybody, do you have internet access at home? Chances are people say, yes, we have Wi-Fi, we got broadband, things like that. Anybody still have dial-up? Nobody. I had it when I moved here. That was like 2007. I didn't get it till like 4 years after I moved here, so that was only as early as 2009, 2010. I still had dial-up, I know. This is rural North Carolina, you know. Anyway, so this is one example, how to construct, a CPI. So we take 2 years, 2010 and 2015. 2015 will be like more recent year like today. I cannot keep updating it every year, so 2010 is the base year, okay? Usually you take the previous year as the base year, and then you take the more current year as the current year. So we look at 3 items, okay? The 3 items we look at is 2-bedroom apartment, the rent. So that's your cost there. You remember that PI, QI, so that will be one of your QI, PI there. And hamburgers, and then we have movie, entertainment, in other words. So if you look at the cost here, let's look at the 2-bedroom apartment in 2010, 500, and then in 2015 it has risen to 630. And then hamburgers, let's see. 2010, we have 120, that means, let's say 60 hamburgers, this is probably on a monthly unit. So 60 hamburgers would be roughly 2 hamburgers a day. So 2 times 30, so we got 60 times 250. So 60 times 250, you get 150. So in other words, in 2015 and more current, in the current year, the hamburgers cost $2.50. And then if you consume 60 of them, you get 150. That's how you get that, okay? So over here, let me ask you a question. How do you get 120? You divide by? Well, how much were, okay, let me back up a little bit. How much do you think was the price of a hamburger in 2010?
$2.
$2, okay. How do you figure it out?
I guess 2 times 6 is 12. You got 120.
Oh, you talking, okay, Zach. Okay, very good. So you take 120 divided by 60, all right, you got 2, so that's $2. Was that you talking?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I hear voices, I have to make sure I know where it comes from, okay? All right, so what about movie ticket? In 2010, the movie ticket cost
Six.
$6, everybody got it? Because 6 times 10, assuming you consume 10 movies per month. Is that a lot? $6 per movie. I'm not talking about this Blockbuster or this, what is this thing called, Red Box, right? Talking about going to the movie theater and watch. That's a lot, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, and how much does it cost? It doesn't cost like $6.
About $11.
Yeah, at least, depending on what hour, right? That's price discrimination. When's the most expensive one? Is that weekend?
At-
probably Saturday.
Saturday,
at the
Saturday
beach at
night,
night.
probably, right? Okay, we usually go, my husband and I usually go Sunday night, because we know all the crowds are gone. You know, all the, because kids have to go to bed and then get up and go to school the next day. So we hit Sunday night when it is quiet, nobody's there. Okay, but you still have to pay, you know, because the evening is cost more. Okay, so back to this. This is $6, and the current year is $7. Seven times 10, you get 70, and then 60 because it was $6. So I hope you could figure that out. 60 divided by 10 is 6. Okay, so now we got this summation of PIQI. We got 2 of them. Remember, this is a base year, so we put the base year one at the bottom. Okay, and on top is the difference between the two. And usually you take the current year number minus the base year number divided by the base year number. That's always easy to remember because that's in the base. So the base year number should go to the base or your denominator in a fraction. Okay, simplify it, 170 divided 680 and use a calculator, you get 25% increase. So that's one way to calculate your inflation. Y'all got your calculator today? Okay. Get it out, be ready. We'll be doing some calculation, yeah. Okay, so some definition before we get down to some more calculation. So CPI, basically, definition again, it measures the average. Average is a keyword. The average level of prices relative to prices in the base year. Now, the word average means not just like gas prices or food prices, but it's the average of all the sectors in the economy. Because remember, when you calculate GDP, we don't consume just gas or industry. We don't consume, we don't just have healthcare and education. We got a lot of stuff, you know. I mean, minerals, agricultural goods, and electronic products and clothing, textile. So you have to add up everything. So this is the average of that everything. Okay. Inflation. So these are all definitions that you could basically find it in your book. I don't know what page it is. If you want to help me, you could turn to it very quickly. So you won't feel like you have to copy all of that. Yeah, around page 70 and 71. Okay. Now, so inflation is you measure how fast. Again, the average, keyword again, you probably want to underline that, the average price level that's changing over time. Now, the next one is the rate of inflation, the annual percentage rate of change in the price level. Okay, the word rate here, let me write it big here. So in economics, every time you see that word rate, that means you have to multiply it by 100, like percentage rate, you know, things like that. Okay, so that's what it is, the annual percentage rate of change in the price level. So you take 2 years, the price level CPI of 1 year and another year, and then you calculate the percentage change. That's very basic. I hope you know how to do it, because we're coming up, we have exercise on that. Okay, the last thing I want to define is the term deflation. Deflation comes from the word deflate. What is deflate? Yeah, you got a flat tire, that's true. That's called deflate, yes. This is a situation in which prices of most goods and services are falling over time, so the inflation is negative. Wow. So write this down, because this is later on, I do not want you to get confused with another term. I'm going to write it down here. Deflation is not the same as deflating. In this chapter, we're going to define deflating, and it's a very serious word. I'm coming to that later. But typically, deflation means you have a negative inflation. Wow. Have we experienced that before? Yes. Examples coming up. During the Great Depression, we did experience negative inflation rate. So yeah, so we did experience something known as deflation. And even as late as the Great Recession, 2007, around 2009, we had very close to deflation. In fact, one year we had 0% change in inflation rate. So we're gonna look at that now. Okay, here it comes. See this? Okay, the rate of inflation is an annual percentage change in the price level. We want to remind you one more time before we do the calculation. So let's look at one example, and then I'm going to ask you to do it. Okay, so everybody does it. I'm going to ask you, what's your answer? Okay, so let's look at this year first. So this is from 2006 to 2010. So we're taking this year. So we ask you, what is the inflation rate in 2007? So what you do is you take the CPI of that year, 2.07, minus the CPI level of the previous year, which is 2.02. Okay, so this is together. This is a subtraction, and then you divide by, again, remember the base. The base will be the original year. The original year will be the previous year, compared from the previous year. Okay, and then if you use the calculator, you get the sets of decimal places. And then because it is a rate, you have to multiply by 100. You got 2.47, which is close to 2.5%. So that's how you calculate inflation rate. So everybody ready? So first row, you do 2008. Second row, you do 2009. Third row, you do 2010. And then the fourth row, the last row, you do this one. This is a Great Depression. Then coming back to your first row, you do 1931. Second row, you do 1932. Last row, you do, and the third row will do 1933 again. So write it out. And then I'm going to randomly just ask one of you to give an answer. Yeah. Okay? So now if you do it in your calculator, sometimes you make a mistake. If you write it out, it's a little bit clearer. Okay, so everybody work on it, and you could by row, and you could check with your friend if you get the same answer. And then I'm going to give you like 1 minute very quickly and ask you what's the answer you got. So this one will be the same. You take this number minus that, divided by that. Not this. So you see, if you do it just in your calculator, you tend to get confused. If you write it out, equation by equation, I used to ask students to hand in, but that gets to be too much, so we just do it in the class. Okay? Enoch, you got the number? You got the first one? Okay, tell me what's the first, 2008. 3.9%. Is that true? Everybody here got 3.9?
Yeah.
Okay, how about 2009? What you got? Zero, yes. That one you don't have to work. Just look at it and say, oops. Right? 2.15 minus 2.15 is? Zero. Zero divide by anything is? Zero. Yeah, so that was very close to deflation, because if there's a zero, there might be a negative. You know, maybe during half year you got that. 2010, what you have? Third row, what you got?
1.38.
1.38. Did y'all get the same number?
One.
Okay, we got 3.9. The first answer, 0. Third row, did y'all get?
I got
1.4%.
I'm sorry?
1.4%.
1.4. Okay, good enough. 1.39, 1.4, pretty close. Okay, what about right here? Did y'all do 1, 2, 3? Yeah. The fourth row, what you got?
Negative 2.3.
Negative 2.3. Very good. Negative. Yes. First row, back to you. Is that what you got? Yeah, you're supposed to do this one too. Coming back to. You got it? Okay, what's the number?
negative 0.89. Well, negative 8.9.
Very good. You got your decimal right, yes. Negative 8.9. Everybody got that? Okay, 1932, back to second row. What you got?
Negative 9.8%.
Very good. Negative 9.8. See, it was getting worse and worse, wasn't it? More and more negative. As you go through as you went through that depression, Great Depression year. What's the last year?
5.1%. Negative 5.4%.
5.4?
5.1.
I got it.
5.1.
I got 5.1.
Yeah, I got .0538, something like that. Oh, well.
Here's the answer. Pretty close.
Yep.
Okay, so as you can see, over here, the inflation rate gets faster. So that's a great. And then you hit 0, and it's probably a deflation somewhere. And then you got a positive number again. You don't want the number to be high. Because some students get confused, say, oh, we want the number to be higher. No, actually you want the number to be low. So, but this is like too much. This is during the Great Depression, is the other extreme. It actually got into negative. As you can see, it's getting more and more negative. And then it improved a little bit here. Okay, less negative. So that was a Great Depression. Now, so that's what it is saying. When inflation rates are negative, you got a deflation. And once again, deflation is not the same as deflating, which we'll define coming up very soon. Okay, how many of you remember seeing this picture? Okay, what is it? What happened?
Basically, no one had a job, so
Okay, people were out of job. What were they lining up for?
free food, free soup, stuff like that.
Free food, yeah. I think that was, what is that, coffee and donuts? Yeah, that's probably what they were going for. Now, that was a pretty bad period of time. It started in 1929 all the way to 1933 somewhere there. But I mean, if you read historians' account, some of them will argue that, oh, the Great Depression didn't get over to the beginning of the First World War. Well, Second World War, excuse me, around early 1940s. Okay, but economies always think it's ended around 1933, somewhere there. So this is a historical inflation rate. We skipped the Great Depression. Look at that. That's your Twin Towers. So what happened there? That's your early 70s and the late 70s. Did anybody remember what happened? Were you all born then? No. Sorry, yeah. When were you?
Baby boom.
You all were born in the, no, not 80s, 90s, I think, 90s, right? Okay, well, some of you 80s maybe, yeah. Okay, so 80s and all 90s, how's that? So, now what happened was, so when you see a peak like that, so this 2 years, particularly, this is during the first oil shock, this is the second one, about 12 to 14%. I happened to live in Singapore for 9 years. I remember seeing that number for that country was about 23 to 25% inflation rate. That's considered extremely high. So the first oil shock, what happened? Anybody remember history? It's got something to do with the Middle East. So has anybody heard about the oil embargo? Do we have any social studies major? No? Okay. Okay, I could tell a story very quickly. So what happened was that happened around the early 70s, and there was an attack from the so-called Arab League nations, attacked the country of Israel. Okay, so, and they were attacked on the day of Yom Kippur, which is a Jewish holiday. It's like our Christmas. Can you imagine being attacked on Christmas Day? September 11th didn't happen on Christmas Day, so something to be thankful for, at least. So that happened on a Jewish holiday. It's like you know, very important holiday, like almost like Christmas. So then the Western Alliance countries form an alliance and say, so we're going to have an oil embargo. Because most of these Arab League nations are from the Middle East, the major oil suppliers. So because of that, the oil supply was cut off. So then we didn't have, you know, any oil, so basically the gas prices went up. So if you ask your grandpa, I used to have a student from, she was like in her 60s or 70s, she could remember what happened in Pembroke. She'd say, well, you know, that gas station over there, people were lining up and the line was extremely long. And you know, you won't want to abandon the line because the minute you did, what happened is when you came back, then it has risen by 10 cents or 15 cents. So it's practically, you know, it just kept going up by 1 cent, maybe an hour or something. So it was so bad. And that's when the country of USA, this country, began to look at fuel efficient economy cars, such as Japanese cars. So that's when you started to have, see before that, look at all the cars that were built in the 70s. What did they look like?
Beauties.
They're huge. Has anybody seen a Lincoln Continental that they had from the 70s? It was huge. It hogged the whole road. Don't try to overtake it. Because it's like so huge, you know, because they had big tank. They were used to building big cars with tanks, you know, big, not anymore. So they started to think about import the cars from Japan, you know. So, and then after that it was over, and then it happened again in late 70s during the, anybody remember who was the president back then?
Was that the transition between Carter and Nixon?
Yes? Well, no, the other one.
Was it?
You got a second president mix up.
Nixon Ford.
No, before that. After Carter. Because after that, remember 1978, 79?
Oh, Carter Reagan.
That's right. We moved into 80, right? So 80 is when Reagan came in, right, as a president generally, 1980. So what happened was, how many of you, well, most of you have heard about a country called Iran, right? Okay. So the second oil shock happened because of this country, Iran. And what happened was this country used to be ruled by a king who was known as the American friend, because he's very westernized, you know. During his rule or his days, the women are allowed to wear any western clothes, you know, makeup, no problem. Just do whatever you want, just like any western country. And everything changed overnight because a religious fanatic took over the country. His name was Ayatollah Khomeini. So some of you might have remember reading the history about it. And so what happened was the country overnight changed. A lot of people fled the country because they wanted more freedom, intellectual especially. Most of them fled to America, including the Shah, who was a king, you know, back then. I think they were trying to find him. He was hiding somewhere in, I can't tell you what state. I think it's one of the western states in the United States. And mind you, an American definitely took him in because, you know, he is considered one of their friends. So what happened was, and the college students, university students, they were also the religious fanatics. They took over the American embassy and took a whole bunch of people hostages. Now, you watch some of the movie, they make so many movies out of it, at least 3. At least 3, maybe 4 or 5. So they took the American people who were in the embassy hostages, and it went on for, how many of you remember how many days? It was like around 400. There was a very significant number of days, I cannot remember. I know it's slightly above, over 1 year.
Is that one of the movies with Ben Affleck in it?
Which one?
He directed one a couple years ago.
Okay.
Which one is it?
I don't remember the name, but it was about the CIA sort of mission where they went in as a documentary crew with the Canadian embassy and
Argo.
brought out like.
Yeah, I think that was one of them, yeah, because there was a little bit of negotiation with the Canadian embassy, yeah. So basically, that was what happened, and then if you remember, going back to '79, some of the Times magazine, you know, people were tying this yellow ribbon around the tree and praying for people, this American hostages to be released, and that was during Carter administration. So there was some policy that he had to impose, like price ceiling on gas prices, and so once again, you know, the gas prices hit high, all-time high. I forgot what it was, but anyway, okay, Reagan. So what happened was, any American president, usually they wanted to have some kind of legacy. So Carter very much wanted to have the legacy of being known as the president who freed the hostages. Because the sentiment was so high, you know, free the hostages, and he was in his last year out. So Reagan took over, I think it was sometime in January 1980. And I think it didn't happen. It was minutes after Reagan sworn in, then the American hostages were released. So in other words, Reagan got the credit, you know, instead of Jimmy Carter. But today, if you read the historian account, there was still some disputes, you know, because they say, oh yeah, Carter was in the country and it was like, the time zone was in the mountain time zone, so there were like all kinds of disputes and say, you know, he should get a credit. But anyway, so that was what happened during those 2 years, and we call it first and second oil shock. Now, around 2008, we almost wanted to name it the third oil shock, because some of you remember that the summer of 2008, gas prices went up to about $4 per gallon. That was like, whoa. So anyway, and I do want to point out that, yeah, there was some heights, years that you have a higher inflation rate, but look at that. It was around 2009. Remember a while ago we looked at it, we got zero. So if you hit zero, right, at some point you might hit negative and then you came back up again. So we did experience a very slight deflation around the year 2009. So this is very interesting, and think about issues like that when you do your paper, which is coming up very soon. Today is what, August?
31st.
Oh, 31st already. So you have a paper that's due September 29, your article summary. So start thinking about this issue, like what you want to do. I will talk more about it coming up. So here it is. There are two types of CPI inflation. One is called core inflation. Now, according to this second type of inflation calculation, it actually excludes two things that usually cause the inflation to be extremely high. That is the gas prices, the energy prices, as well as the food prices. So if you look at this, this is very interesting, 2007 all the way to 2010. See, that number is lower than this number. This is typically the general inflation rate, 2.85. But then if you take away food and energy, you realize that, oh, we're not doing so badly. It's only 2.35. So likewise for 2008, this is extreme. This one is really unusual. So if you want to do a paper, find out a little bit more about what happened there. It might be a very worthwhile paper to do. You actually did experience deflation, but then, you know, if you don't include the food and energy, it's actually higher. And then this again is lower. Okay. So in other words, there is certain benefits of using this particular inflation rate known as core inflation rate. Again, this makes a very good article summary if you want to dig into further what is exactly is core inflation and look at some of the historical value for the US. You might learn something, you know. And okay, so it is useful for measuring short-term effects. So typically we say that inflation is a long-term effect, but then there is also short-term effects, where if you include the energy prices, you will see a little bit more, and the food prices. So now we're coming back to that term deflating. Remember a while ago I say deflating is not the same as deflation. So what exactly is deflating? Now, remember in the last previous classes, we talked about the difference between real versus, what's the other one? Very good. And in that particular case, we were referring to, I think it was the GDP, wasn't it? Okay, and then I mentioned that you could also apply to household income, you could also apply to interest rate, you could also apply to your wages, real wages, nominal wages, real GDP, nominal GDP. So once again, to remind you, this is the same thing you saw before. So a nominal quantity means a quantity that you measure in terms of current dollar value. Okay, the current year number. So the real quantity is a quantity that you measure by looking at the physical terms, for example, in terms of quantities of goods and services. Now remember one of the calculation we have for GDP, right? We leave the Q alone, but then we change the base year, we change the prices by conforming those sets of prices to the base year prices. Okay, now we're getting to the very important definition. What is deflating? Specifically, what is deflating a nominal quantity? So I'm going to write down an equation for you. So typically, if you want to calculate a real value, well, in this case, we can be a little bit more specific, yeah. Okay, here we could write in general. So this is a nominal value. You divide it by CPI. Okay, I guess the nominal value will be whatever prices it is, and you divide by the CPI, Consumer Price Index, you get the real value. So, deflating a nominal quantity means the process of dividing a nominal quantity by a price index. So that's what I'm showing. Express a quantity in real terms. And that is very important because in economics, especially when you measure the GDP, you have to take into account inflation. So every time you see the word real, that means you have already taken into account inflation. So let's look at one example here. We look at 2 years of family income, 2010 and 2015. 2010, your nominal family income was $40,000, and in 2015, 5 years later, it was $44,000. Is that good? When you look at it, the first glance you say, Yahoo, that's great, I earn $4,000 more, but wait a minute. We gotta give you more information. The more information come in by saying, oh, what about CPI in 2010, which is a base year because the CPI is 1, and usually that's a hint for you that that's a base year. And the CPI for 2015 was 1.25. So this is how you calculate, okay, the real value. Take the nominal value, 40,000 divided by 1, you get the same number, 44,000 divided by 1.25, because this number is greater than 1, so you expect to get a smaller number, which is 35,200. So this is very important. So this is what I'm going to say. So in other words, because of inflation, 25% higher, in that 5 years period of time, your real household income actually was lower than 5 years ago. Wow, that's an eye-opening. What is the real family income in 20? Go ahead and calculate that. Tell me the number, yeah. So in this case, if you're given another CPI number that's kind of in between, you got 42,000. What was the real family income in 2012 then? You can calculate it if you have it. Anybody want to give answer?
36,521.
36,000?
521.
521. Did everybody get approximately that number? Okay, so what does it say? That means, in 2012, the real income was actually better off than 2015, but worse off than 2010. So that was the next question. Now, I usually ask students to do it hand, but I'm not doing that because I'm kind of want to finish the first half. Let's look at baseball players. We got any baseball players here? We used to have 1 or 2. Okay, so let's look at Babe Ruth. He was a famous baseball player during the Great Depression. And some of you may collect his baseball cards because they're worth a lot of money. And Barry Bonds was the baseball player in the early 2000. Okay, so we look at 2 years, very extreme, 1930 and 2001, and Babe Ruth nominal salary was 80,000. And then we use 82 to 84. You could use a range of years as base year. Okay, so basing it on 82, 84 for both years. So these two are current years. The base year are given as 82, 84. Okay, so for Barry Bonds it was, whoa, how do you read that?
10 million.
10.3 million in nominal salary. And then we told you that, well, yeah, poor guy, he was during the Great Depression. So 0.167, we calculated that earlier. That was below 1. And then in 2001, the CPI was much higher, 1.78. So again, you take this number, divide by the second number, you get this number here. So that rate, 479,000, and that rate, 5.78 million. So you look at it and say, oh, wait a minute. Well, this guy has a lot more. Look, this guy has actually got worse. Shrink. About half. Not quite, but you know. So that's inflation tells us a lot of things. It does not convey information. Okay, look at this, all this number about relative income, because 1930 was Great Depression, therefore CPI was a lot lower. Multi-million-dollar salaries coming for sports star in 2001. So in other words, you know, by looking at this, it doesn't tell you much. It depends a lot on that CPI to give you that final number. Right, because when you look at it, you say, oh yeah, this guy's doing much better, but look at this. You know, I mean, this number is actually lower, but that number actually higher for the first guy. Okay, so we want to define one more thing, real wages versus nominal wages. Same thing, real wages means you have taken into account what Jake said earlier, the purchasing power. Okay, you got, you know, if you look at real wages, you're looking at your real purchasing power. In other words, you have already taken into account the so-called inflation rate. So the same thing, if you were to calculate real wages, all you have to do is just replace this by wages and wages, so you get the same number there. Okay, so let's look at this number here. So this is very, really eye-opening here. We look at, again, using 82, 84 as a base here. We look at 1970, which we have just explained that was during the first oil shock here. The average wages is $3.40. 2010 it was $19, probably an hour. But then CPI in the 70 was 0.39 and 2010 was 2.18. So again, do the same calculation, you come out with actually, the same real wages. Wow. So what does it say? The real wages more or less stay the same, you know, in that 30 years period, whoa. Even though your nominal or your average wages seems to be 5.5 times higher. So historically, my last slide, you could see this trend. Nominal wages keep going up. Not that thing fool you. The real wages actually stay more or less the same. So this is where I will stop. So come back on Friday and try to finish up.
That's cool.
So don't forget there is a tutor session if you want to go for it at BA 113. It's voluntary, it's not mandatory.
Take the test first.
Good luck. See ya.